Welcome to the new era, where averages are the down. And I mean that literally. Today, an algorithm can generate an average essay, average designs, average code, average opinions. Clean, confident, and instantly produced at the speed of a prompt, which is quickly becoming the speed of thought. And in this new era, the biggest risk isn't that AI replaces you, it's that you start replacing yourself. Outsourcing, thinking for output, trading originality for autocomplete. Because output is getting cheaper than thinking, and that changes everything. First, thank you for inviting me back. Truly, this community shaped the first 15 years of my life, and being here on this event is nostalgic in the best way, and I'm really grateful. Also, I've been an exhibit for a little while now, so I realize some of you might not know me. If you do recognize me, hi, I'm glad that there are familiar faces in the room. And if you don't, let me introduce myself briefly. I spend most of my time inside the AI world, building these systems, studying them, and staying close to the frontier. And I spend my days surrounded by people who research them, ship them, debate them, frontier conversations, and frontier knowledge. And over the past couple of years, especially living in Boston with MIT and Harvard around the corner, I've been incredibly lucky to learn directly from some of the most influential minds in the field, whether through mentorship, a conversation, or just being in the room for the talks that shape where AI is going. And I've had the distinct pleasure to learn and meet some of the people I look up to the most and that are currently spearheading the field or have been for decades. And through these series of opportunities, I've also gotten to mentor, to teach, which is something that I particularly enjoy. And a highlight of mine this past year was getting invited as a speaker and mentor for CalHacks, the world's largest collegiate hackathon hosted by UC Berkeley, with some of the best and most impressive hackers and builders. And professionally, I've had the privilege of leading teams and projects both with local startups and US-based ones, building and deploying these systems into the real world, advising on AI policy, as well as partaking in highly strategic engagements with some of the leading companies in the space, such as NVIDIA, Google DeepMind, and others, leading technical and strategic framing in those engagements. More generally, I'm a tinkerer and a builder at heart. I've loved technology for as long as I can remember, so for me, AI isn't just work, it's also fun. And it's basically my 24/7. And when I step outside that bubble, when I talk to friends, family, or just people who don't spend their lives reading AI research papers, I notice something that worries me. We tend to have wildly disproportionate perceptions of what AI is. Not because AI isn't revolutionary, it is. It absolutely deserves the attention. But we often treat it like a human mind or this living entity of sorts instead of what it actually is. And that misunderstanding isn't just philosophical. It shapes how we use it across society. So before I continue, I want to make sure we are clear on what we're actually talking about when I say AI. And for that, here's a fun fact I love because it changes how you think about the whole conversation. Artificial intelligence was always a bit of hype term on purpose. It was coined in 1955 by John McCarthy along with Minsky and a couple others while they were writing a funding proposal for what later became the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on Artificial Intelligence. And yes, funding was very much part of the story, and McCarthy later explained pretty matter-of-factly that he deliberately chose the phrase artificial intelligence in efforts to get the project funded. It was meant to sound bold, ambitious, attention-grabbing. Something that suggested big intellectual stakes and not incremental engineering. So what does that tell us? First, AI is not a new field, not even close. And second, the term still does exactly what it was designed to do. But it also created a side effect. It invites us to picture a mind, person, something more than a machine or an algorithm. So we start attributing human qualities to machines. And there's a word for that, anthropomorphizing. And it just means giving human traits to something that isn't human. And to be fair, we do this with everything. We see faces in clouds, we name our cars, treat our dogs like kids. So of course, when something speaks in perfect sentences, our brain goes, that sounds like a person. But now a quick caveat, when I say AI today, I'm being quite specific. I'm talking about what most of you interact with. Transformer-based generative AI, the systems behind ChatGPT-style tools, writing assistants, code assistants, and the new wave of agents. And that's not the entire AI field, but it's the most visible to consumers, and it's the part shaping day-to-day life the fastest. And anthropomorphizing it is the core category error. In very reductive terms, it's a probability engine. It learns patterns from massive amounts of data and predicts what usually comes next. And here the key word is usually. Usually the next word, the next line, next structure. That's why it can sound incredibly human without being human. And there's a reason in particular behind why it feels so powerful, and that's scale. More data, bigger models, more compute. A lot of what just looks like magic is just scale producing capabilities that feel like they appear out of nowhere. Researchers call these emerging capabilities, abilities that become visible once models get big enough. And one big example is language fluency. The model becomes good at next token prediction by absorbing statistical regularities in language through something like implicit grammar induction, which basically means it learns grammar from getting exposed to a massive corpus of text, and as you scale, more structure emerges. And even in research, we can't fully escape human metaphors. We literally call units inside these networks neurons, not because it's a brain, but because humans designed it and we reach for human language to try to describe it. And we've all heard the warnings about risks and misuse concerning AI, and those concerns matter. We should take them seriously, but we should also avoid the Hollywood version of fear. We're not dealing with a robot with a soul or consciousness. We're dealing with systems that are powerful precisely because they predict patterns extremely well. Fundamentally, it doesn't have a point of view. It has probabilities. Have you ever wondered how a model sees language? It definitely doesn't see or understand words like we do. It sees numbers, or representations for that matter, in a high-dimensional space. These are embeddings, and they're the model's numeric meaning vectors, and latent space is the geometric space those vectors live in. And you can think of it like coordinates. Words become points in a huge space, and the distance and direction between them roughly represent the context and relationships between the words. And this is what a transformer looks like. And no, I don't mean the bumblebee type of transformer. In ChatGPT, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and not to turn this into an engineering lecture, but simply to make one point. This is a system built to transform inputs into representations that make a prediction possible. And here's what I want you to notice. The model turns your words or your prompt into numbers or embeddings, then it passes them through repeated layers that mix context, and each layer updates what each word means based on the words around it until the system can make a best guess prediction for what comes next. This isn't the brain having thoughts. It's a system updating representations to make the next prediction possible. And that brings me to the real trap of this new era. So, if that's what these systems are, powerful probability engines, amazing, atypical, and not inherently true or wise, then yes, average is now easy to automate. And this brings me back to the line I opened with. The biggest risk isn't that AI replaces you, it's that you start replacing yourself. That's the real trap of this new era. And yes, when average becomes automated, everything becomes more competitive. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. I'll get to the upside in a minute. That said, the most imminent risk is not that AI will suddenly become a supervillain or the Robocop-like scenario many imagine. The trap is that it makes it incredibly easy to confuse output with understanding. Because output looks like competence, it's clean, it's confident, it's formatted, it's fast. And the most dangerous thing about these tools isn't what they can do. It's what you can slowly train yourself to stop doing. The fundamental danger is that autopilot starts to feel like progress, and fluency starts to feel like mastery. When average is on demand, the world fills up with average everything, average arguments, average code, average thought leadership, average opinions that sound certain but have no spine. And I don't mean average as an insult, I mean it literally. Most likely, most common, statistically typical. But here's the problem. In a world flooded with perfect sounding work, it becomes harder to tell what's real, what's earned, what's tested, and what's just polished. The world we're walking into won't be lacking content. It'll be lacking genuine authors, creators, builders. It'll be lacking authenticity. People with a point of view, people who can explain their reasoning, people who will be able to stand behind what they say. proof of work will become increasingly more important. And because in this new era, it's easy to start saying, the AI said, the agent did instead of, I think, I did, and here's why. And yes, AI may help you in the process, but you must understand what happened, not as a passive user extracting output mechanically, but as the person responsible for the work. That's what I mean by outsourced responsibility. Giving away ownership, handing your judgment to a machine, and letting the tool drive while you just sit in the passenger seat. And here's the hard truth. With that autopilot approach, you're borrowing competence instead of building it. And now, this is where it gets especially important for you. As I was preparing this talk, I realized most of you are at an inflection point. You're shaping what comes next. Your interests, your direction, your career. It wasn't long ago that I was in your position, 2020 to be specific, and the world you're walking into now is wildly different from the one I walked into, and frankly, it can be very scary. To be fair, 2020 was equally scary, but for different reasons. But all jokes aside, you're stepping into a technological revolution of unprecedented scale and disruptive potential, and AI's speed of diffusion has been unprecedented. Unlike past revolutions that have required decades of physical build-out, AI is digital, deployable through existing infrastructure, and scalable at near zero marginal cost. And unlike technologies that mainly transform one sector at a time, AI's scope of application has the potential to touch almost every industry and almost every kind of work. So yes, big shifts are coming, but all these can be condensed into one big and scary question. What happens when labor is no longer the foundation of our economy? We can debate automation and the future of labor all day and discuss the myriad of economic analyses out there, but there's a point that matters most for you. If you're already deep into a career, you've already built your toolkit, mental models, instincts, taste, you've made mistakes, you've learned what good feels and looks like. AI can accelerate you because you can evaluate it, you can steer it, you can spot when it's wrong. AI didn't erase expertise, it rewards it. It amplifies people with craft, taste, and agency. But if you're still building your foundation, if you're still becoming who you are, there's a much more expensive risk. It's increasingly easy to skip the struggle that builds your skill under the disguise of productivity. And I'm not suggesting a black and white approach of never use AI. I'm saying something much more practical. There's a discipline you get from wrestling through confusion, through writer's block, through a hard problem, through I don't know yet. That friction builds structure and it helps shape your craft. It builds judgment. It builds your ability to make decisions when nobody gives you the answer. If a tool removes all friction before you build the muscle, you don't become faster, you become dependent. And the most expensive habit, especially at your stage, is letting output replace thinking. Because you can never actually build expertise, which brings me to one of my favorite lines regarding AI, which is AI is multiplicative. If you multiply by zero, you still get zero. So no, the goal isn't to fear AI, the goal is to get strategic about your human edge. Leaning into augmentation and not automation, and don't put yourself in a position of being average and easily automated. Here's the framework I want you to live with, which is what I've been referring to as the human edge. It's important to remember that there are plenty of things humans can do that models still struggle with, and many of them are surprisingly simple. There is something deeply valuable and unique in being human, and in this new era where average gets automated, what becomes priceless is craft, taste, and agency. Craft means you build at least one real skill, so you're not just consuming outputs, you're understanding inputs. And writing, coding, design, research, storytelling, math, persuasion, anything really, but it has to be real, because if you don't have a foundation, you can't tell what's good, what's broken, or what's true. And in a world where tools can generate plausible-looking answers, the ability to evaluate and validate becomes everything. AI should make you more capable, not replace the formation of capability. Now, taste. When I say taste, I just don't mean aesthetics. Taste is the ability to recognize quality and push work toward it. Taste in writing, in code, in reasoning, in problem solving, etc. Taste in what's elegant, robust, and actually useful. And taste is trainable. Here's how you build it. 4 verbs. Curate, compare, critique, and create. Curate great work, compare it, critique it, then create your own and iterate. And shape your own thoughts, ideas, questions, and opinions. That only happens by seeing, doing, listening, and getting exposed to a lot of information and learning to discriminate quality. Interestingly, that's also how these models got good. So in this era, good becomes common, but distinct becomes rare. Taste is the compass that keeps you from drifting into the most likely, the most average version of everything. And agency, this is the one most people skip, but it's the most important. Agency is responsibility, it's ownership, it's deciding what you believe, what you think, and what you stand behind. Do not let AI make decisions for you. Let it help you explore, let it help you brainstorm, let it help you accelerate. But don't outsource the final call. Because once you outsource your decisions, you've outsourced your growth. And that's the heart of it. In this AI era, the advantage isn't only speed, it's judgment, taste, and responsibility. And yes, speed matters, we all want to move fast, but speed without judgment is just sloppiness at scale. So let me give you a real world example. A few months ago in San Francisco, I had dinner with some of the early folks at Lovable. And if you haven't heard of it, it's one of the fastest growing tools in this wave of AI code generation tools, precisely because it makes it building apps unbelievably fast and easy, prompt to app almost instantly. And I asked them something I was genuinely curious about because I keep running into the same argument over and over. You code, but now I can code. Developers won't be needed anymore and you will be out of a job soon. So I asked a very simple question. Who are your most successful users? And clarified that by successful, I didn't mean demos or prototypes. I meant how close do they actually get to something production ready? And if non-technical users can truly go 0 to 1. And even pressed a bit further and followed up with, is your best user the person who doesn't know how to code and suddenly builds a real product, or is it the person who already has fundamentals and uses the tool to move faster? And their answer was clear. It's the second one every time. The most successful users usually already have fundamentals, engineering instincts, product judgment, the ability to evaluate and steer. And very often they're T-shaped, they can bridge more than one domain. They're not just pushing buttons, they're making decisions. They're guiding the system. They know what good looks like. Same tool, 2 outcomes. A builder uses it to compress time, explore variations, and sharpen decisions, and a passive user accepts the first output because it looked finished and they don't even learn in the process. The difference is the human edge. So if there's one message I want you to take from today, it's that this algorithm of average isn't the end of your future, and this AI wave isn't the end of careers. This is what happens with any general purpose technology. Disruption is just a surface. The real shift is a fundamental redefinition. Yes, some tasks will be automated, absolutely. But what really changes is the ceiling, augmentation, a new set of tools that multiplies human capability if we know how to steer it. And that last part applies to both sides of the table, to the people building the systems and to the people using them. Because the advantage isn't just access to the tool, it's having the judgment to steer it, use it, and most importantly, shape it. Yes, we're moving fast, but there's still a lot of groundwork to be done. And what it should be, though, is a paradigm shift, the end of autopilot. Average is already being automated. So don't let output replace thinking. Build craft, train taste, keep agency. Use the tool, don't become one. And in this new era, aim to become more human, not less. Thank you.